fine. And then I'm just gonna apply. This is just to remove the excess solder, and it's not going to really remove the socket that way, but just to prepare it. You can remove the socket with the soldering iron, but I like to use the hot air station instead for both taking it off and soldering it back in. It's much quicker that way, much easier. Remember, so I'm going to start from, let's say, 50mm distance. Just to get the flow, the solder gets used to it. I think the air is a little bit too high, so I'm going to set it to about 1. And then raise the motherboard a little bit so the USB socket just drops. You can actually see the solder is melting up. Until all the 4 corners are melted and liquidish. And then just tap it. Okay, once it's actually been tapped, you can just push it like that and it comes off easily. Now for the second one, I'm just going to add a little bit of flux, because what we put the flux before kind of dried a little bit, so this will help it. And I'm going to grab my heat gun and just point it at the solder connections like that. And when I see they're actually kind of melting, I just start tapping it. Okay, when I see it's kind of okay, just the last 2 connections here. Don't try and force it, because it should come off easily really, because we want to make sure we don't break any connections. So just tapping it like that. Gotta be quick between putting the because the solder will get cold quite quickly, so you gotta be quick between putting the gun down. There we go. That's it. Now we remove the port. It's quite hot, don't touch it with your hands, just inspect. We got obviously all the connections here are fine. These are the main ones, the 4 ones, and these are the neutral ones are fine. Look inside the USB socket, it's pretty much, it's a bit hot. I'm going to put a little bit of flux. And there's 2 ways. You can either use solder wick and soldering iron, or you could use a heat gun and a pump, a solder suck pump, which is something like that basically, and that will pump out the solder. And when you notice the solder is kind of melting, then we will pump it out. So we get these nice clear holes. I have to clean my pump. She's not picking up. I wouldn't spend $500 or more on something like that, and they're really great. That's it. All the holes are clear. Now I'm going to again add a little bit of flux and just clean the area, the excess solder, with some wick and okay. We'll wait for this to cool down. I'm actually going to speed up the process of cooling down. Okay, next thing is to use isopropyl alcohol and just clean up the area around, clean up the excess, the old flux we used. Use cotton bud, just clean it off. Flux isn't corrosive, so don't worry about that. Okay, now it's clean, ready for the USB port, so I'm just going to fit one at a time and replace one at a time. Okay, just going to quickly solder doesn't have to be an awful much of solder. You just put in solder on the soldering iron, and then let the soldering iron do the job. clean afterwards with alcohol. So that's basically an example of USB socket swap on a laptop or a motherboard or desktop. Okay, if you don't have a spare, you can actually buy spare USB ports from eBay or some websites. They can sell you the port itself, so you don't have to remove it.